Hi, it's Mike. This it's a big day today. This is the first of the Stories That Matter interviews where I take a deeper dive, let's say, with other business owners, often freelancers, but sometimes bigger than that. And we look at their story, the things that made them what they are today, why they do what they do, and what business need means to them in the world. The first interview is Canadian copywriter and launch strategist Grace Fortune. I will leave Grace to introduce herself into the right video. Here we go. So this is the first Stories That Matter interview. This is a big occasion, and I'm delighted to have Grace here today. I suppose the thing we need to talk about first is how and why you got to where you are now. And I know that's a big question. So let's kind of start at the beginning, as it were.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me on Stories That Matter. I'm totally happy to be here with you interviewing me. So we'll go ahead and get started. Should I actually just introduce myself first and tell people kind of who I am and what I'm doing?
Yeah, I suppose that was the question I should have asked you, really.
No problem. I'm Grace Fortune. I am a launch strategist and copywriter. I am located near Niagara Falls, Ontario, in Canada. So what I'm doing now is I help my clients, who are typically other copywriters or coaches, business coaches specifically, to launch courses, memberships, and whatever programs they are currently selling. I help with launch strategy. I help with launch road mapping, and specifically email copywriting. That's just kind of a quick overview of what I do. Yeah. So to your original question, you kind of asked for an overarching theme. How did I get into, how did I get where I am now?
Because your journey is, you're kind of like me as well. You weren't a born copywriter.
No. Not even a little bit. Okay, so I've had so many different jobs. I started working when I was 16 years old. I have worked as a bus girl in a restaurant. I worked as a factory worker in a place that manufactures bingo products. I've worked in a call center, so I was that person on the other end of the phone, trying to collect money from people. I worked in tech support. I worked in sales. I worked in, like government survey type calls. I even had another factory gig at one point handling like toxic chemicals, which was scary. So what I found throughout all of these different jobs that I had, I felt like they just didn't work for me. Like I wasn't a fit for those jobs. I'm not a very coordinated or physical labor type person. I didn't like being on the phone all the time. So I felt like I didn't really belong anywhere. So I went back to school when I was, how old was I? I would have been 31, I think.
Oh, okay.
30, I think. It's all a blur to me now.
So you spent quite a long time in searching for your purpose.
Yeah.
For a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. I could be totally botching the year. It was a long time ago now, but I went back to school, to college for a dental office administration program. So to learn how to be that person behind the desk at a dentist office. So I started that, and then I finished the program. I did very well in school. Anything theoretical and learning wise, I'm very, very good at. So I did very well, placed basically at the top of my class for that. But I found at the end of it, I had a lot of trouble getting a job in a dental office because I didn't fit the mold at the time of what people expect. My teeth were not straight. I was not a very good face for a dental office. I hadn't had braces or orthodontics. My teeth were not very nice to look at. So I wasn't getting hired. So then after I went back after I finished school, I ended up going back into working for a collection agency. So again, I went back into another call center type job.
Yeah.
Still hated it. And then I finally got hired at a place with really, really good benefits. And then after a while, I qualified to have my braces and orthodontic work fully paid for. So therefore, as soon as that happened, I ended up getting a job at a dental office. So I worked there for a year, found out that I didn't like that either. So it was like an ongoing theme of job after job after job that I really, really couldn't stand for one reason or another. Either it was the work or it was the people or a combination of the two. So after about a year of working at this dental office, a friend of mine hired me on as an executive assistant because she owned a business that was virtual assisting. So she helped clients and I helped her help her clients. So as we started working together, we basically served other copywriters. So
Yeah.
that's how I fell in love with copywriting as an industry. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the people. It was great. And I realized through experimentation, trial and error, that I'm actually quite good at writing. And I didn't know that before. So we kind of experimented with that. I started out writing, social media copy, blog content, all of that kind of stuff for my boss. So this takes us to about March 2020. We all know what happened in March 2020. That's when the pandemic hit.
A little event, yes.
Yeah, just minor, no big deal, blip on the radar.
No big deal, no. Yeah.
So once that happened, I had just a moment where I know I need to do something on my own. I don't want to work for anybody else anymore. So I left that job. And then I started my own virtual assistant business to start out with. And then about 6 to 7 months later, this takes us to the end of 2020, early 2021. I joined Rob and Kira at the Copywriter Club. I joined their accelerator program because I'd always been kind of like watching from the sidelines, like admiring these copywriters from afar. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And then during it was like either a webinar or some kind of work group that they were holding. I joined it, and I said to Rob Marsh, I said something like, Rob, I write copy for people, but I'm too afraid to call myself a copywriter because I had it in my head that you could only call yourself a copywriter if you were like super famous, like the Laura Belgraves of the world, the Tarzan Kays, the Shanti Zacks, like all of the famous copywriters. So you were not allowed to call yourself
of this world. Yeah,
exactly. You weren't allowed to call yourself a copywriter until you had reached that level of success. And looking back on it, it's pretty obvious that that's not true. But Rob is the one who talked some sense into me. He's like, if you write copy, you can call yourself a copywriter. It's okay. It was almost like getting permission to own that label.
No, exactly. I know exactly how I feel.
Yeah. So at that point, I was still like, I joined the accelerator program, and then I went right into the think tank mastermind program. And that's where I started realizing, you know what, I would be a lot more valuable to my clients if I did like a marriage of the two things that I had done. Because as a virtual assistant, I helped my clients with launches, right? It was either implementation, helping them. So it's almost like my original VA business and my copywriting business had a baby. And so I eventually started calling myself a launch strategist and copywriter. So that's how I got where I am today.
I mean, when I first met you, must have been a bit more than a year ago, wasn't it now? And at the time you were calling yourself a copywriter, and you were transitioning out of the VA business. I think you had 1 or 2 VA clients left or something. I think, and the idea was to basically become a copywriter, make that kind of transition. Yeah. It seems like there's there's a lot of, was there any kind of, when you were younger, was there any kind of plan, any kind of dream?
Honestly, I did not really have a specific goal or dream. The jobs that I had made it very, very difficult to think big because they were all very like low level jobs. And with the way that I was raised, we were all like very, blue collar. None of my family members had higher paying jobs. So it was in my head that this is just how things are, right? I'm never going to be wealthy or whatever, and that's okay. So I didn't really have a change the world dream. I'm still kind of working on what my final mission and final purpose is, but as I know that as I've grown and seen some success in my own business, I really, really, really want to be in a position to help more people get the same thing and break out of that cycle of working these low level jobs and having more income and more freedom to do the things they want to do.
It's interesting you say that, because that's kind of one of my big things as well about, I mean, when you're talking about the expectations you were growing up, it may not necessarily be blue collar, because I had a relatively middle class upbringing and I had the same kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that we're told when we're young about, don't get your hopes up.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to show off. Don't stick your head above the parapet, because, and it's the kind of thing our parents tell us almost to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not doing us any favors.
I would agree.
And so I'm just trying to think of a kind of this is going to edit out this bit, because this is where I've lost my train of thought. So all these things lead to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it, I mean, what's happened over the last 3, 4, 5 years, because that's where it's all crystallized, I think, isn't it? It's how much of this was, can you trace any of it back to when you were younger?
To be totally candid, what I can trace back to where I was younger is the things that tend to kind of block me now. I still suffer from imposter syndrome. I still worry all the time that
We all do, yeah.
Right. It's there's definitely an aspect of that. And there's still a part of me that's scared of success. That makes me think like that I don't deserve it. That I'm not smart enough, or I don't know what I'm doing enough to earn significant amounts of money from my business. I'm also neurodivergent. When I was 8 years old, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So yeah, so having focus issues is difficult. I tend to have squirrel brain, so I have to stay focused on what I'm doing by creating like tangible to-do lists and tasks. Otherwise, nothing that I want to do will get done. And it's very easy for me to get squirrel brain. Like in the last couple months alone, I've thought of like 4 or 5 different potential businesses I could branch into. Like I considered I considered burning down my, the course or the launch part of my business and just writing emails for people, because I really like doing that. I've also considered opening up like an online template shop where people can, buy templatized emails, social media posts, all that kind of stuff. So having that focus is challenging for me.
Does being, I mean, I'm just speculating here, does being the VA help that? Gives you focus?
It's definitely given me the tools that I need to get to where I am now. If it wasn't for what I learned as a VA from my previous boss, I would never really have learned to do like task lists and use project management tools and things that actually keep me on track. So for that alone, like I'll always be super grateful. And what I brought forward from that as well is, how to run a business. I didn't know any of that before I watched my friend in action doing what she does.
I Something that does interest me as well, and coming back to the past, really, is that we learn skills along the way, and we only realise after a certain time that, oh, actually, what I did 10 years ago is quite useful for what I do now.
Mhm.
And again, I'm speculating. I mean, you did a lot of telephone work in call centres. Presumably, was cold calling, was it,
Yeah.
or
So what I brought forward from my time in call centers is the ability to provide great customer service. Like I'm very, very good with my clients. They love coming back to me for more work. They're not afraid to refer other people to me and advocate for my business. Like if I tell my clients that, I have an opening, they usually have somebody to refer to me. So there's
yeah,
that. From I guess it's more learning how to be organized and how to deliver. Like I have a very linear way of thinking. Like I know I've learned to break down step by step what I need to do to get the outcome that I want. And I've learned that from my time as a VA, and also, from my time as a in call centers, in the dentist's office. It was
yeah.
all very like process oriented. So this is what you need to do. Here's how you do it. I've learned to make it very simple in my head.
No, that's certainly kind of it's one of those transferable skills that you'll always take kind of with you. It's like, I mean, I would kind of make the comparison with, I've got a history degree, and that taught me how to sort out what's important, what's not important, and
Absolutely.
analyze facts and things. And what kind of people do you work with now, then?
I'm sorry, what kind of
What
people do
kind
I
of
work
people do you work with now?
Yeah, so creative business owners, so other copywriters, business coaches. I've even worked with financial advisors. I've worked with like I can work with web designers. One of the benefits of having so many different, I guess this harkens back to your last question. Another thing that I've learned with how many jobs I've had is how to be adaptable for different industries. It doesn't take long for me to pick up on a new niche. For example, like a month or two ago, I wrote blogs for a manufacturing company who does CNC machining for aerospace companies,
Oh,
and I was able to
you're welcome to that one.
I'm not going to say that it was exciting or a fun blog to write.
No.
However, but the fact is, like, I was able to think through it because of the different industries that I've written for and worked with in the past. It
Mm.
was transferable in that sense. I knew how to get the information that I needed to write the blog.
It's interesting you say that, because everybody and his aunt in the particularly in the copywriting industry, says that you need to specialize.
Hmm.
And there's a kind of a growing area of thought, and I've got some amount of sympathy with it, is that a lot of copywriters will specialize too much, because they don't realize that's not necessarily what clients are looking for.
Hmm.
Clients are looking for outcomes.
Right. So,
Uh,
I mean, I would agree. I would agree that there are pros and cons to niching down. It's really, really good from, I would say, from a marketing perspective and how to talk about your business if you have a specific industry you work for or deliverable niche.
mm,
But I would also, and depending on how you run your business, how your lead generation is, it could that could either be a good or bad thing. If you're not very strong in the lead generation part of running your business, then you can end up having too small a pool for your specific deliverable. If you have a wide enough network and a strong enough referral system, having a very specific niche can work well. There's a person in our think tank group who writes websites for interior designers. It's very, very specific,
Oh yeah.
but it works for her.
It works very well for her. Yes.
So that's what I mean. But for somebody else, that might not work. It all depends on how you run your how do you run your business? What are you doing on the back end to get more clients and leads?
I'm suspecting that because you've got such a, this is speculation, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but because you've got such a wide and varied background, it's almost like you don't need to specialize.
Yeah, I mean, I specialize to an extent, right? Like I work in the course launch space, so I have like I've put my flag in that niche, but it's a big enough niche where I can deliver in multiple ways.
Yeah, what I mean is you don't niche in terms of market, you niche in terms of what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to start writing websites tomorrow.
No.
Or doing sales.
But I thought about it.
Yeah.
I thought about doing that too. So this is what I mean. Like
One thing
very, very difficult.
One thing at a time then. But because your deliverable is relatively niche, but your market isn't. It's the kind of thing you can do for anybody. You know, it's like emails. You can write emails. It's like any copywriting, because you know we are both copywriters, so that's what we're talking about here. But it could apply to any business. If you're a painter decorator, you know, you might only want to do interiors or exteriors, or you have a preference for bathrooms or bedrooms or whatever. I mean, I know that's a ridiculous example, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a restaurant, you know, you don't serve any kind of food. It's always one particular type of food for a big audience.
Right.
So it's often a forgotten part of specialization, is that you provide a specific thing well for a wide audience rather than the other way around.
Right. Can I give you an example of that? So
yeah.
So your restaurant example, it's like having, let's say, for example, if you have an Italian restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that you're an Italian restaurant, but you can have so many different choices on the menu that are still Italian food.
Yeah.
Right? Is that example. The same thing with, Chinese cuisine, Indian food, whatever, right? It's all about people need to know what kind of restaurant you are, and then they can see what's on the menu for themselves.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's right. So what happens next?
So that's difficult to say. I know
I want lots of possibilities, haven't you? You've got kind of backup plans.
So many. So right now, what I'm doing is going through a complete rebrand and overhaul of my website. So my website looks very, very different now than it will in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
I'm relaunching it, and I'm hoping September 1st. That's my goal date. I'm still going to be in the same space. I'm going to be helping people by performing launch audits. So if anybody's having trouble with a specific part of their launch, they can come to me. I'll analyze it, help them figure out what's going on with it, how to improve it. Another thing I'm offering is launch blueprinting. So if somebody is trying to do a launch and they're like, Grace, I don't know how to do this, I'll help them figure it out. And then my last tier of offer is my biggest one, rather, not my last. My biggest offer is going to be my 6 to 8 week course launch. It's like a coaching package where I help you manage the project from start to finish. You'll have like a fully completed project management tool where you can see everything that you need to do on a week by week basis in order to get it launched. So that I think that'll be super valuable for a lot of people. Lastly, I do still want to write email copy, like launch emails. I don't want to. What I'm not going to be doing anymore is writing like sales pages. I don't want to get into all of that stuff. I really don't enjoy sales page copy. So I'm going to be avoiding that like the plague.
No, there's plenty of other people that can do it.
Yeah.
Getting a bit more philosophical.
Yep.
We've only really talked about work up to now, but obviously, kind of what I'm interested in is kind of how much what you're interested in the outside world informs A, how you show up,
Mm.
and B, how you run, what kind of gets to be part of the business. Because, full disclosure, we know we're both sci-fi nerds, and, and there's nothing to be ashamed about.
Not at all.
No, and well, obviously you're not going to go talking about Star Trek to clients, but I mean and that's a kind of an exaggeration perhaps, but I mean what I'm trying to get at is kind of you as a person, you and your values. How much does that inform how you run your business?
That's a really, really good question. So again, one of my biggest values is basically it's the golden rule, treating everybody with kindness and respect, treating everybody the way that you would want to be treated. That informs it informs every part of my business. It informs how I write content. It informs how I approach sales copy. It informs how it even informs my contracts. I have, am I allowed to say a swear word on here?
Oh, could you say whatever you like? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, YouTube might take offense, but I don't care.
Well, it's not horrible, but I call it a no assholes clause. I have a no assholes clause in my contracts.
Well, I think we all should have those. Yes.
Yeah. So it's just, all it is basically saying, like, there needs to be a mutual respect, treat each other with kindness. If you don't like something that I'm doing, or a part of the project we're doing, that's okay. Just tell me in a kind and respectful way, and treat others that way as well. If that's all I ask. And I've just found that I found that some people don't always understand that when you're working with somebody who's like a contractor or freelancer, sometimes they treat these people like employees, or somebody who's there at their beck and call, and it doesn't work that way. When you like hiring somebody who owns their own business, they have other clients, they have other priorities, they can't necessarily devote 100% of their time to you. So it's about respecting each other's time. Another way that the golden rule informs my business is I'm a very strong believer in ethical copywriting. So I believe that when you're writing sales copy, it should never be harmful or manipulative to people who legitimately should not be buying the offer. So a lot of times, something that I've found, especially lately, it's become more and more noticeable to me that when people are writing copy, or even seeing, just even when you scroll through like your social media feeds, you see every other ad, it seems to be, buy this thing, and if you don't, you're less than, or you're not good enough. You can't make it to the next level without buying my specific product. And for me, that doesn't feel good, and I think that it's a disservice to oftentimes people with less advantages than, say, you or I have, right? It can be very harmful. So I'm intentional about making sure that what I put out into the world is, as minimally harmful as possible. So I don't, in my copywriting specifically, I don't use like countdown timers. I don't use like a false sense of FOMO, or this act now when it's not necessary. Like sometimes there are a limited number of spots in a program for very good reason. Like a friend of mine has a a do-it-yourself web copy program, and she's only one person, so she can only serve a certain number of people in this program. So when she says, I have 10 spots for this program, she literally has 10 spots in that program, because that's who she can serve at a high level.
There's only 24 hours in a day, yeah.
Exactly. So something like that, I'm totally fine with. And I also respect and understand that you're a business. You're not, you're not a non-for-profit charity. You want to make sure that you can, live your life, pay your bills, etc. But it's all about figuring out, okay, how can I sell what I'm selling in the least harmful and most ethical way that I can? That's something that's very important to me.
How can I put this? Do you know where that kind of attitude comes from? I mean,
Yes.
upbringing or
Yeah. So yeah, it is a big part of it is my upbringing. Coming from that place of, not being scared that I can't pay my bills the next month. Watching, my parents struggle, almost my entire family struggling financially. The idea of, somebody, especially now when, like I was saying, every other thing that you see on your social media feeds, which we spend more and more time on, is somebody selling you something. Or wanting you to get your email address and your information so that they can put you in their sales funnel. I just feel like you have to be cautious and cognizant of who you're trying to sell to, because sometimes people will do almost anything to get rid of whatever pain point that the person's attacking. Like, let me use weight loss for example. There are tons and tons of weight loss programs who swear up and down that their solution is the greatest thing ever, that you're going to lose tons of weight, etc. You'll be thin and beautiful, and everybody will think you're attractive, and etc.
yeah, and you can have
People will do, who fit that category, will do almost anything to get rid of that pain point, because people want to fit in. They want to have money, they want to have time for their children, etc. So I just feel very, very strongly that you can't do that from a predatory place. Like, it has to be like genuine and something that's needed and accessible wherever possible.
and that is a particular industry that has been preying on those fears for at least the last century.
Yeah.
Particularly in the US.
Yeah. And yeah, I use weight loss as just an example, but
Yeah.
it's almost coming to, it is coming to a point where it's almost the same thing for business owners, right? Like in the copywriting space, like I get tons of ads for, this is how you're going to build a 6-figure business. And if you don't have a 6-figure business, and like, what are you doing as a copywriter?
You're somehow not worthwhile.
Exactly. So it's the same thing, but just a different industry.
I suppose that leads me into what was probably the last question now is how do you see your role? I don't want to kind of overblow it by saying how do you see your role in society, but you are part of a community.
Yeah.
In the sense that you've got clients, you've got a role to play with clients, you've got a circle of friends, of connections, either in the real world or online.
Yeah.
I suppose the best way of asking the question is, how do you see the role of your personal brand? And I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
But and what I mean in terms of personal brand is how do you see? Well, yeah, just how do you see your role as an active member of society?
Yeah. So I think I'm still kind of working that out. It's really
you'll do, yeah.
It's really become more and more apparent to me that this is something that needs to be done in our industry, like fairly recently. It's always been kind of in the back of my head, but it's becoming more and more noticeable to me and difficult to ignore. So I think the first thing that I'm doing is basically leading by example, like making sure that I'm not using harmful practices in my own business with my clients. Like speaking more and more about these practices, informing, like helping people recognize them more and more, so that they're never robbed of critical thinking when they see sales copy and whatnot online. I think as well, keeping up to date on what's current, like what's going on now in the launch industry, keeping abreast of any trends and changes, because things can change very, very rapidly. So again, just being very verbal about harmful practices, what they are, what they look like, and how people can make tangible change. I think that's the biggest part of how I see my own personal role. Like I've never really been the type to say, like I'm gonna change the world. I always felt like
But in a way,
stuff
you may be doing that, maybe trying to do it in your own little way.
maybe. And I'm not a pioneer on this by any means. Like there's a lot of people.
Oh no.
There's a lot of people out there who are very verbal about ethical sales. Like Tarzan Kay is a really good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
She's always talking about mindful practices. Like even her program that I've taken, Copy Caboose, has talked about ethical marketing. Excellent program.
More and more so now, actually. Yes, I mean I've done her email stars, and she's a bit like that. Even then, the email stars is a few years old now, but
yeah, it's an excellent program, and I just but anyway, like I've always felt like staying in your own lane and doing things right yourself, and then having people watch you and see you as the example, I think is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Because I never want to be one of those. I don't want to be like a blowhard about it and just sit there on my soapbox and pedestal and shouting about what other people need to be doing. I'd rather take action on my own.
Do it, yeah. Do you see yourself as a role model?
I mean, I've never really wanted to be, but it's kind of fallen into my lap. So I would say, I would say that I'm becoming a role model. Like as I get more well known as a copywriter and launch strategist, then it'll become more and more strong of a need for me to be a role model.
I think you're right. It's the kind of thing that we kind of morph into without particularly intending, because the more we specify our values, and I think that only comes with time, certainly has with me, we wouldn't necessarily have been having this conversation 3 years ago.
No.
And in 3 years, I mean, 3 years' time, we might have a different conversation.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, 3 years' time, we'll have another conversation.
I would definitely.
No, that's great, because it's what I love about these conversations is just finding out about people, digging into them a little bit, and because without getting on my soapbox, these values are the kind of things that drive us and attract customers to us as well. Getting back to the specialization thing, we are in the wonderful position of being able to choose our customers.
Yeah.
To a large extent, and unless you're really hard up and you have to take, but and so the branding, it's just as important to work out who you don't want to work with as it is who you do want to work with.
Yeah.
Because people will self-select. If you do it right, people will self-select. And then you attract the people that you want to work with and who are willing to pay you proper money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome.
It's been a pleasure. I mean, we've had a number of long conversations in the past, so yet another one. I wish you the best for the future, and I will ask you when we finish for all your contact details, and I'll put them down in the description if anyone wants to engage with you.
Yeah, perfect. Like I'm easy to find. GraceFortune.com is my website. You can find me on social media everywhere at, it's Grace Fortune. That's my tagline. email me, grace@gracefortune.com. Like, I'm super, super easy to find intentionally. So always never hesitate to reach out to me no matter what. So I do want to say thank you for having me, Mike. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you very
Our
much.
conversations always run on the long side, don't they?
They are, yes. Well, we're cutting it a bit short this time because, you know, this is the public conversation, so we won't get into some of the deeper stuff. I will talk to you about Star Trek next time. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Have a great day.
That was Grace. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed doing it. It was actually quite fun. Grace is a friend of mine, full disclosure, so we are quite used to talking to each other. If you'd like to be featured here and you think you've got a story worth telling, an interesting story, just drop me an email. The link's in the description below. And like I say, if you got any value out of this, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, as we have to say when we're growing YouTube channels. And I will see you in the next time.